The night was cold, so cold that a human breath would freeze before leaving the mouth. 9 people were sleeping inside a tent. Experienced mountaineers, calm, exhausted from the climb. The wind roared across the mountain, but they were used to storms. Something else made them wake up, something that was never written in the official report. The exact time is unknown, but we know what happened. The tent was suddenly torn open from the inside. Not opened, not pushed aside, torn. The thick expedition fabric was slashed with a knife, as if the people inside no longer had time to think. They ran, without shoes, without winter clothing, into a temperature capable of killing human skin within minutes. No rational person would ever do that, unless something inside the tent was more terrifying than death outside. The year was 1959, the Northern Ural Mountains. The local indigenous people had a name for this mountain, the place where no one returns. 9 people entered that mountain. None of them came back alive. But their deaths were not natural. When the search team finally found the campsite, the silence of the mountain felt wrong. No animal sounds, no signs of struggle, only a half-buried tent in the snow, and footprints leading away from it. Human footprints. Ordered. Calm. As if those walking knew something was behind them and chose not to run. A few hundred meters down the slope, the first body was discovered. Beneath a pine tree, his hands were injured, the skin on his fingers torn away, as if before dying, he had desperately tried to climb the tree. But what truly froze the rescue team in place was his face. It did not look like someone asleep. It looked like someone who had spent the final moment of life staring at something beyond explanation. And this was only the first body, because the others were found in places no logic could explain, and some of them were no longer whole.
The snow had swallowed everything. The mountain was silent. Too silent. The search team expected an ordinary accident. Perhaps an avalanche. Perhaps a lost route. But with every step forward, an uneasy feeling followed them. As if they had entered a place where humans were never meant to exist. The tent was found on the slope of the mountain, half buried beneath the snow. The ropes were still secured. The equipment inside remained perfectly arranged. Shoes, warm clothing, food, everything was there, except their owners. And then, something took the breath away from everyone present. The tears. Long cuts across the tent. The edges bent outward, which meant the people inside had cut the tent open themselves. Not to leave calmly, but to escape. The footprints moved away from the tent. Not running, not chaotic. Just slow steps disappearing into the darkness. 9 people, in a temperature where only minutes were needed for the human body to fail. Further down the slope, beneath a massive pine tree,
2 bodies were discovered, almost naked. Their skin was not burned, yet it had turned an unnatural gray. Branches several meters high were broken, as if someone in complete terror had tried to climb upward, to see something, or to escape something approaching. Between the 2 bodies, the remains of a small fire were found. Humanity's final attempt to stay alive. But the cold moved faster. A few meters away, a 3rd body was discovered, facing toward the tent, as if in the final moment he had decided to return. But he never made it. Another body lay farther ahead, and another, even farther, like the trail of a desperate attempt. As if they had realized a terrible mistake had been made, but it was already too late. The search team believed they had found the answer. Hypothermia, disorientation, human error. Until the deeper snow began to melt and 4 more bodies were revealed. Bodies that changed the entire story. One had a crushed skull. Another had shattered ribs with force comparable to a car crash. Yet on the skin, there were no external wounds, no signs of impact, no evidence of struggle, only internal injuries, as if an immense force had compressed the bodies themselves. And then, something was discovered that silenced even the forensic experts. One of the victims had no tongue. Not cut, not bitten. It was simply gone. From that moment on, the case was no longer a mountaineering accident. Something had happened on that mountain for which no explanation existed. And worst of all, everyone who witnessed the scene shared the same feeling. The hikers did not die from the cold. They were afraid first. The bodies were buried, but the horror was only beginning. Forensic doctors expected a simple cause of death: cold, disorientation, human error. But the autopsy reports told a different story. The force of the injuries found on some victims was estimated to be equal to a severe car crash. Ribs were crushed, skulls were fractured, yet the skin remained intact, as if an invisible force had destroyed the bodies from within. And then, details emerged that pushed the case into forbidden territory. Some of the hikers' clothing showed abnormal levels of radioactive contamination. Not small, higher than natural background levels. No explanation was given. No further tests were allowed to be released. At the same time, residents of nearby villages reported seeing strange orange lights in the sky on the night of the incident. Glowing spheres moving slowly. Not airplanes. Not meteors. Something silent. Something hovering in the sky. And shortly after that, 9 people lost their lives. The official Soviet investigation suddenly stopped. The area was closed. Access was forbidden. And the case ended with a strange statement. The deaths were caused by an unknown natural force.
No explanation. No details. Just an ending. But those who later studied the case noticed a disturbing pattern. Every victim had fled the tent before dying. There were no signs of animal attack, no evidence of another human presence. And most importantly, none of them attempted to return to the tent, as if something was still there. Something that would not allow them to come back. Years later, one member of the search team said a sentence that was never forgotten. We felt the mountain did not want us there. 60 years have passed. The mountain is still there. The wind still makes the same sound. And every winter, snow settles once again on that same slope. The place where 9 people ran into the darkness. Without shoes. Without hope. Without explanation. The case was closed. But the questions were never buried. If it was an avalanche, why were the footprints calm? If it was an animal attack, why was there no other trace? If it was a natural accident, why did even the investigators avoid speaking about it for years? Maybe we will never know the answer. But one truth remains.
Humans do not usually run from the cold. They run from something that is alive, something that is getting closer, something unseen, yet undeniably felt. And maybe, just maybe, that night at Dyatlov Pass, the hikers were not alone. If tonight you suddenly wake in the silence of the night and feel that something is standing outside your room, remember, they felt the same thing just seconds before the end. Some mysteries are never solved because perhaps humanity was never meant to know the truth. This was not just a case. This was the first story of things that are still waiting in the darkness. Next episode, coming soon. That was never forgotten. We felt the mountain did not want us there.